In this lesson, we're going to cover functions. Now, a function is a block of code which only runs when it's called. You can pass data to functions and have the function do something with that data, and the function can return data after you've done whatever you want to do with it. Now, up until this point, we actually have already started using functions because print is a function. So in our lessons, when we say print my name and we run it and it prints out my name, print is a built-in function of Python. So in order to use a function, we first need to define the function. The way we define the function is we use def, define, and then we're going to name our function. Now the naming conventions of functions are very similar to variables. They need to start with a letter or underscore. They should be lowercase. They can have numbers, and they can be any length, and that needs to be within reason, because if you start making very long names for your functions, it's very hard once your code gets complicated, not only to keep track of it, but also to enter it and make sure that you get it right. So we're going to call this function my underscore function. We're going to add parentheses, and we also need a colon at the end of our line that we define it on. So define my function parentheses colon, and then we need to make sure that we indent this for Python, and underneath that definition we're going to put in code whatever we want that function to do. So in this case we want it to print my name. And so the way we call that function is my function and then parentheses. So my function is the name of the function, parentheses, and we'll run it, and it comes up to this line and then does everything underneath it, which is printing my name. Now we can pass information to our functions. So our functions can act as shells for code, and then as our program's running, the information that we get from a user or the information that we derive from our program can be put into our function so that it can make our function do things with that information. So we're going to change up our function a little bit. I'm going to say my name is, and if we run that function, we know that it's going to print out my name is Slim. In order to pass an argument, what we need to do is first we need to set up our function to accept an argument. So I'm going to leave off the word Slim, and we're going to pass a name, which is a variable. And so this first name, just like we did when we concatenated in the last lesson, we're going to add that to the end of our string literal. So then we got a concatenation of my name is, and then whatever this first name is equal to. The way we're going to pass that is when we call the function, we're going to add in these parentheses whatever information we want to pass to the function. So when we run that, it still prints out my name is Slim. And we can test it just to make sure that it's working. And one other note about passing arguments, and also arguments are sometimes called parameters, but when we pass arguments to functions, we can actually pass more than one argument to a function. So an example of this would be we're going to pass two separate variables. We want our function to pass my name is, and notice that in between these two we add a comma. So argument 1 is my name is, argument 2 is Shady. We want to make sure that we have two arguments that our function can take. So 1, 2. If we only pass one argument or pass three arguments, we will get an error with this. So we're going to set up our print function so it concatenates it and print it out. And we know from lesson number 1 we can fix that little space error by just adding a space there because it's a literal string literal. And we can see that if we take away one of these arguments and only pass one argument to our function when it's expecting two arguments, and we run that, we do get an error because it's expecting those two arguments. And there is a way that we can have our function accept a number of arguments even if we don't know the number of arguments, but we'll get into that a little bit later because that involves lists.